When we think of the Middle Ages, most of us picture stone castles, knights in armor, and great feasts of meat. But beneath that imagery lies a quieter, greener revolution, the vegetable gardens of peasants, monks, and smallholders, rich with crops we almost never see today. These forgotten vegetables were far from mere garnish. They were survival tools, flavored treasures, medicinal plants, and ecosystem builders. Many of them grew in tough conditions, thrived in poor soils, and offered tastes and nutrients we've largely lost. In a world hungry for sustainability, diversity, and flavor, perhaps it's time we invited them back into our fields and plates. Imagine stepping into a medieval vegetable plot. You'd see rows of root vegetables like the long, thin white skirret, its sweet vanilla-like taste hidden underground. You might pull up a pale, tender stalk of Good King Henry, a leafy perennial used like early spinach, returning year after year with minimal care. You'd recognize some things: onions, leeks, parsley. But you'd also discover crops like salsify, the so-called oyster plant that thrived in winter cold and tasted of the sea. The botanical variety of the medieval era was immense, yet many of these plants fell out of favor, replaced by modern hybrids, industrial crops, and global monocultures. Sources of medieval vegetable lists show the breadth of what was available: root vegetables, leafy greens, pulses, herbs, and worts. The story of these lost crops begins with necessity. Medieval Europe, climate, soil, and social constraints meant the peasants had to grow resilient plants. No chemical fertilizers. No greenhouse heating. They planted what could endure lean winters, feed families, heal ailments, and regenerate soil. Monastery and cottage gardens became the laboratories of survival botany. The gardens at places like medieval abbeys held plants evolved for harsh conditions, not perfect markets. Let's walk through 10 of these forgotten vegetables, quotes that once sustained entire communities, and explore both their historical context and why they matter today. One of the first is skirret, a perennial root vegetable. Skirret produces clusters of pencil-thin white roots, sweet and nutty. It's tasting like a cross between parsnip and carrot, with something extra. Unlike many annual crops, skirret would return year after year, requiring minimal replanting. Many medieval cooks roasted or boiled it. Records show it was prized in feasts for its unusual flavor. In modern times, skirret has virtually vanished, replaced by the more uniform carrot or parsnip. Yet its hardy nature, its deep roots, and minimal inputs make it a strong candidate for regenerative gardens today. Next, consider scorzonera, Scorzonera hispanica, also known as the black oyster plant. With a black outer skin and creamy flesh, the root had an oyster-like flavor and remarkable resilience. It could stay in the ground through winter freezes when little else would grow. In medieval medicine, it was even reputed to treat snake bites and plague symptoms. Reviving scorzonera not only brings back a forgotten taste, but a vegetable adapted to low input, cool season production. Another lost champion is Good King Henry, Chenopodium bonus henricus, sometimes called poor man's asparagus. This perennial leafy vegetable provided early spring greens at a time when fresh vegetables were rare. Its shoots were treated like asparagus, its mature leaves cooked like spinach. According to historical seed kits of medieval varieties, Good King Henry was common in cottage gardens. Today we seldom plant it, yet in permaculture systems it thrives, returns each year, and fills a spring gap. Then there's cardoon, Cannara cardunculus, a dramatic plant resembling giant celery or artichoke, with silvery blue leaves and tall stalks. It was grown in monastery gardens as both a vegetable and even for cheese-making enzymes from its flowers. In a modern context, its tall form edible stalks and historic significance make it an interesting crop for vertical gardens and heritage revival. Alexanders. Smyrnium alisatrum is another forgotten vegetable, originating from Roman times, but planted across medieval Europe. Every part of the plant, leaves, stems, roots, seeds, was edible. It had a flavor somewhere between celery, parsley, and myrrh, and grew wild along the coasts and in cottage gardens. Its use declined, yet it remains hardy, self-seeding, and full of flavor. Reintroducing Alexanders invites culinary nostalgia and ecosystem services for pollinators. Salsify Tragopagon porifolius also deserves mention. Often called the oyster plant for its flavor, Medieval monks grew it in monastery gardens. It produces long parsnip-like roots, whose tender shoots can also be eaten in spring. Modern gardeners find salsify quirky, but its winter hardiness and nutritional value make it relevant in diversified food systems. Another interesting crop is lovage Levisticum officinale. Often tall and bold in medieval kitchen gardens, it served as the all-purpose flavor enhancer before bouillon cubes existed. Its stems candied into sweets, its leaves used in soups, seeds for bread. Medieval physicians prescribed it for digestive complaints and joint pain. Today, lovage is rarely seen in mainstream vegetable gardens, but its versatility and hardiness argue for a comeback. Rocket Eruca sativa, now common as arugula, is in fact one of those medieval salads with a peppery bite. Monastery gardens often grew rocket because it self-seeded and thrived in poor soils. Medieval cooks treated it as both a salad green and medicinal herb. In modern times, we've replaced it with weaker cultivars. Reviving its older forms means stronger flavors and richer microgreens. Lamb's quarters. Chinopodium album might look like a mere weed today, but in medieval gardens it was actively cultivated for its nutrient-dense leaves. Higher in iron and protein than many modern greens, it also produced thousands of seeds, making it a survival crop in lean times. Cultivating it today adds resilience and diversity to our food systems. Finally, Orache Atriplex hortensis, with its purple, red, or golden leaves, was grown in coastal gardens for its heat tolerance and fast growth long before decorative leafy vegetables became fashionable. Its seeds were used as porridge in lean years. Bringing Orache back means adding vibrant color, salt tolerance, and variety to our salad mixes. Each of these vegetables reveals a different facet of the medieval food system. Long-term crops like skirret and good King Henry, root vegetables that survived cold winters like scorzonera and salsify, bold herb vegetables with flavor like lovage, self-seeding wild allies like Alexander's and lamb's quarters, and vibrant leafy greens adapted to marginal soils like rocket and Orache. They show a worldview where food was integrated into ecosystem, medicine, and daily survival. Why did these crops fade away? A mix of industrialization, global trade, selective breeding for market uniformity, and changing taste preferences. Modern agriculture favors maximum yield, uniform shape, and shelf stability. Many of these vegetables were smaller, tougher, more flavorful, but labor-intensive. Consumer preferences shifted, seeds became rare, and as a result, diversity collapsed. Today, agristructures favor just a handful of vegetables, leaving heritage crops behind. Yet, in our age of climate change, soil degradation, and nutritional deficiencies, these medieval vegetables offer real value. They were resilient, often perennial or self-seeding, could thrive on poor soils, and supported winter survival. For gardeners reclaiming soil health, for chefs seeking bold flavors, or for farmers practicing agroecology, these crops are tools as much as history. Take skirret. It tolerates heavy, wet soils where modern carrots struggle. Plant it once, harvest for years. Or good King Henry, a perennial green that breaks the so-called hungry gap of early spring. These are plants built for low input, high return. Likewise, lovage is a towering plant of flavor and pest resilience. Orache brings color, rapid growth, and salt tolerance to seaside gardens. The modern gardener or small-scale farm can benefit from their existence. Historical records of medieval vegetable lists and monastery gardens show such diversity. Many root crops, leafy greens, pulses, and herbs that are barely seen today. It is not just nostalgia, it is a blueprint for resilience. Beyond the garden, these crops also belong in our kitchen and our minds. Imagine sharing a roasted skirret root at a winter supper, or a spring dish of good King Henry sautéed with garlic and oil. Consider substituting Orache for bland lettuce, or adding salsify to a stew for that subtle, oyster-like finish. Culinary experiments with these crops can revive flavor and history together. Underground roots like scorzonera create interest. Leaves like lamb's quarters bring nutrition. Herbs like lovage enhance flavor without chemical additives. There is also a cultural connection. Kitchens of medieval Europe were not separate from gardens. They were connected. The vegetable patch fed and healed simultaneously. Some of these crops had medicinal uses: lovage seeds for digestion, salsify roots for respiratory health, lamb's quarters seeds for emergency flour. Reintroducing them today connects us back to a tradition where food and health were intertwined. From the viewpoint of biodiversity, these crops are important. Many old varieties harbor genetic traits lost in modern commercial vegetables: tolerance to pests, adaptation to poor soils, perennial growth habits, self-seeding ability. Seed banks and heritage gardeners are slowly reviving some of these varieties, but much remains to be done. Each of these plants not only deserves revival for flavor, but for the resilience they offer. There is a practical blueprint for reintroduction. Start small. Plant a row of skirret alongside carrots. Trial salsify in winter beds. Designate a perennial bed for good King Henry and lovage. Scatter Orache in your salad mix for vibrant color. Support Alexanders and lamb's quarters as wild allies that reseed and support ecosystem. They integrate into modern food systems more easily than most think. They simply require a shift in mindset. They also challenge modern assumptions of cultivation. We assume all vegetables must be annual and uniform, or sterile and needing heavy inputs. The medieval system taught otherwise. Allow perennials, allow self-seeding, allow flavor and resilience to matter more than superficial perfection. These plants were often ignored because they were irregular or ugly. But that very irregularity often meant greater genetic variety and ecological strength. On a broader scale, reintroducing these vegetables is a step toward food sovereignty, growing crops that suit your land, your microclimate, your soil, and your palate. Not just buying mass-produced produce shipped across continents. In an era of supply chain shocks and climate instability, the medieval lessons of food diversity matter more than ever. Of course, not every medieval vegetable will suit every garden or climate. Some require patience like skirret roots, others taste strong or unusual like lovage, can dominate a dish. And some are self-seeding to the point of rogue behavior like Alexanders and lamb's quarters need containment. But that is part of their charm. It's modest space, minimal input, and a willingness to explore. Anyone can reclaim a piece of medieval vegetable heritage. To bring this into action, begin by sourcing seeds of heritage varieties. Seed kits marketed as medieval garden plants already exist in Europe, attesting to a renewed interest. Join heritage seed libraries, participate in community gardens, and share your successes. Over time, the diversity will return. In some, these 10 forgotten vegetables, skirret, scorzonera, good King Henry, cardoon, Alexanders, salsify, lovage, rocket, lamb's quarters, orache, are not just historical curiosities. They represent food systems built for resilience, taste, nutrition, and survival. They hint at a time when vegetable patches were as important as grain fields, when a root could keep a family alive through winter. When kale was not just kale but good King Henry, and a salad was not just lettuce but peppery rocket. Modern agriculture may have marched forward, but it left many treasures in its wake. It's time to look back in order to move forward. These vegetables don't just deserve revival, they need it. They need to come back into our gardens, our kitchens, and our diets. If you found this journey through medieval gardens compelling, if you're excited to experiment in your own soil, and if you believe in food systems that are rooted in resilience, sustainability, and flavor, then subscribe to our channel. Every week we dive into heritage crops, forgotten foods, survival skills from history, and how the past can teach us to eat and grow better today. Because the vegetables of the Middle Ages were not relics, they were lessons, waiting to be rediscovered.